Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install our timing set here, and our timing set comes from Cloy's, and what I like to use on any engine is a Cloy's True Roller timing set. Now there's double rollers and then there's true rollers. Now true rollers, the difference is each of these links here actually has a roller on it versus just a standard double roller does not have these rotating links. So this is much like a bicycle chain, and these are a lot stronger and they won't stretch from wear near as bad because of these rollers. So that's real important to use a chain of this nature, and they're only about 40 bucks, so I prefer to use them. So on this timing set, what we're going to go ahead and do is install our crank sprocket first. And our crank sprocket, if you want to advance or retard the cam timing, this part right here, we'll get real close. This one right here is to advance the timing, this one's to retard the timing, this is straight up. I recommend going straight up unless you really know what you're doing. So we'll install the keyway into this slot. So I'm going to go ahead and get that slid on here. Sometimes it takes a few taps, but sometimes like that they slide right on without a problem. So now what you want to do is on these timing sets they have two marks like this, and then there's one on the crank sprocket, and you want to line these up. So what I'm going to do is line up our keyway here with this, so with this mark right here. So we'll go ahead and get prepared to do that. Okay, so what I've done is I put my crank bolt in here and I rotated these to rotated the crank so that the keyway is pointed straight down, because again it needs to line up with the keyway, this spot on the cam. So it's easiest if you put the keyway in the up and down position like you see here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and slide this all on together at once. And it can prove to be a pretty tight fit, so you want to just kind of walk it on. New cam gears and stuff are pretty tight. So okay, we got it down and seated, and it'll float to where it wants to be, but that's pretty much it. And there's no slop in there whatsoever. And then we're gonna just simply take our cam bolt here and run it down and take it to the proper torque. So we'll do that next. Okay, so now that we got our camshaft all aligned and our cam gear bolt tightened down and everything looks like it's in place, and we have our oil slinger / fuel pump drive set in there right with this lip going into the same lip in the cam for the dowel pin. Now with the cam dowel pin, what you need to install for this is you usually get two sizes with your cams, and more often than not it's the shorter one as opposed to the longer one, but you can always pull them out and put them back in. But I like to put a little bit of Loctite on them after I know exactly which one I want to use, so I like to mock it up first. But so I went through and I mocked it up and I got the right one in there, so got it all Loctited in there, and we're ready to just tighten our cam gear down the rest of the way and we should be good. So it torques down to 40 foot-pounds, and generally you don't need to dog the motor to torque this. So I'm going to go ahead and just go right to 40. So if it does start to turn like it is on this motor, what I'm going to go ahead and do is, I'm going to go ahead and dog the rear of the motor with two flywheel bolts, and I'll show you how to do that. You don't want to really grab onto the snout here for the reason that you don't want to gall this all up for when your harmonic balancer goes on. So we'll go ahead and get that dogged. So I got 2 flywheel bolts here, partially threaded in at least the width of the bolt and length so that I won't pull the threads out. But then I just have the crank here dogged with this crowbar. Now the crank's going to want to rotate this direction, so as you can see, this bolt's going to go down, so it's going to catch on this crowbar, and the crowbar is resting on the motor stand. So if you have to dog the motor at any point in time, that's a really good way to do it. So we'll go ahead and get this torque down now. Okay, so we're going for 40 foot-pounds. So using our old school torque bar here. Alright, perfect, we're at 40. Just to double check your work, so generally you'll have a crank tooth that should come down in between 2 teeth on the cam sprocket. So as you can see, here's our 2 marks, here and here, straight up and down. So we have good alignment, and not any play in the camshaft, or we don't have any play in the timing set. So we should be good to move on to the timing cover. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install our front main seal here. And you always want to put a new front main seal in whenever you have the timing cover off. It just makes sense. So what you want to do to get the old one off is start from the back of the timing cover where the oil would be, and you'll have your old front main seal like this, and you need to find a driver that you can use that'll catch this lip, and you can pound that seal out through the front side. So anyway, we got that out, so that's done. And what we're going to go ahead and do is install our new one now. So we're just going to flip our timing cover over here. And I like to put a little gasket sealer around the edges of my front main seal just to make sure it doesn't leak. That's what this red paint is usually for, to seal that stuff up, but it just makes me feel better to run a real light coat around the outer edge. Just extra security. No reason not to. So just nice even coat. So once we got that on, we're going to set that in, wipe our hands off here, and then we need to find a driver to seat this bearing. And what I have here is just a piece off an old pull start on a lawnmower, but it goes right in there nicely, and then we're just going to drive her on in there. You want to check it every so often, make sure you are going in straight. Okay, and then you want to make a visual inspection around the sides, make sure there's no gaps between your bearing and in between your front main seal and your cover. So you want to give it one more good once over, and you can usually tell the difference in sound when you're seating it. It'll make a lot more of a ping noise. Okay, so it's all seated and we're ready to grease this up and install it. So we'll get to that now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install our timing cover, and we're going to use our Felpro gaskets here. Move everything out of the way. You want to make sure all your mating surfaces are pre-cleaned which I have done. And then you just want to get a little bit of gasket sealer on your finger and start applying it to the mating surfaces. So I'm going to have to work pretty fast here because I got quite a few things to seal up. I'm actually going to put part of my water pump here in the freezer because that'll help to keep the gasket sealer from hardening up while I'm working. So I got the water pump in the garage freezer, so shouldn't have any problems there with it hardening up before we're ready to stick it on. So some may consider this overkill, but I just like to be better safe than sorry, especially on these water ports. I really like to have gasket sealer, but you don't have to, but I recommend doing so. I've had a lot of leaky situations, so I'm going to just get a nice coating on the whole mating surface. It's a little bit more forgiving that way. So then, just going to slide our gasket on here. Appears that everything lines up as it should. We're going to go ahead and put some sealer on our gasket. And you don't have to stick the gasket on here before you add the sealer. I just wanted to make sure that I was putting it on the right side, or I wouldn't be putting it on the same side that I just put gasket sealer on the block. But you could just mock this up beforehand so you know. But like I said, I'm racing the clock here with my water pump sealer. If nothing else, you want to make sure you really get some gasket sealer around those water ports. Not too much, because you don't want it, when you tighten it down, squishing in there. But you want to have enough that gets the job done. Okay. We got all our sealer on. We're going to go ahead and put our timing cover on, and I did buy all new bolts down at the hardware store for the timing cover because bolts have a tendency to corrode out, and I also, before doing this, tapped out these water pump bolts because they have a tendency to rust out. So we'll apply a little gasket sealer to the threads of these two bolts here before we install those so that we don't have leaking issues. And eventually here we're going to have to slide the harmonic balancer on before we finish our tightening procedure. So it appears here that we have a little piece that needs to be popped out. We're just going to go ahead and pop that out. Go ahead and land our timing cover. Has a little dowel pin on that side. So we're going to quick snug all these up, and there's 4 here on the timing cover. Or excuse me, there's 6 because there's 2 down here below. So we can reposition our camera here. There's 2 of them down below and behind that have to go in. So I'll make sure you get those in and snugged up, or else you'll leak from the top of your timing cover. I'm going to go ahead and install my harmonic balancer to make sure everything's seated up here. So dope up everything so we don't damage our new seal. So you want to make sure you don't have any binding when you're going in. So get our crank bolt here from under our makeshift tripod. Go ahead and slam that in there. So this is pretty important to run in your harmonic balancer before you have your timing cover tightened down, because this will really help to keep your seal where you want it. Okay, so you don't have to torque it, you just got to get it down snug. Now we're going to go ahead and take our gasket sealer here and start to coat where our water pump gasket's going to go. Again, make sure you get around these water jackets. You don't want to have it super heavy on there, but you want to have enough on there to account for all the corrosion imperfections that do occur. Okay, so we got that all nice and coated up. So we see that our gasket goes on like so. So I'm going to quickly coat this side of the gasket with sealer. What you don't want to do is let your gasket fall on the ground and get a bunch of grit on where all the gasket sealer is, because then you're going to be clamping that down. You run the risk of causing a leak. Okay, we have that all nicely coated, and we're going to go now and get our water pump out of the freezer. Okay, so our sealer is still good and tacky, so we're going to go ahead and install our water pump. Some of these big long suckers go all the way through. Just finishing up tightening this down here. So these all torque to 20 foot-pounds, but since you can't get on most of them, I went through and torqued them as best I could. There's discrepancies when you use a torque wrench, because these bolts here, if your threads are galled up, because they are subject to rust in the block, so it's really not accurate to use a torque wrench. You can if you'd like, but there's these two under here that you also need a wrench to get to anyway, so I just prefer to go ahead and use a socket and a wrench, and you can get a good feel for it. And when they're good and tight and the surfaces are mated up and you can see they're pressed in real well, then you're good to go. And you're dealing with aluminum, so you don't want to go too tight because you'll split it. So just want to work your way around, kind of tighten it and check again. These are the four most imperative ones, these two and these two over here. A lot of people experience leaks in those areas. So I think we got it all good and tightened down, and we're good to go. Okay, so as you can see, we have our timing cover and our water pump installed, and you always want to do these at the same time because these two bolts run through both the water pump and the timing cover into the block, so you want to make sure you have all those in. So you want to work pretty quick because you are working with gasket sealer. And a real quick explanation on why I put the harmonic balancer in is see how this surface and this surface is lined up perfect, and I got to shave a little bit of the gasket down, as is this side. So if you don't put your harmonic balancer in, you just rely on the one dowel pin on the side of this timing cover, this will be not correct. So that timing cover, or the harmonic balancer into the front main seal, really helps to line this timing cover up really well. And this really isn't the issue, but the issue is if these are slightly moved around, that front main seal will not be exactly right. And then when you install your harmonic balancer into the front main seal and you run the motor, you'll develop a leak very quickly. So, and it's not these motors that are at fault, it's just the assembly procedure. So this is the part on Fords that's harder than Chevrolets, because you really need to have this harmonic balancer in when you run down this timing cover. But anyway, we got our timing cover and all of everything on here, our water pump. So we should be good to next move to the pan, and then the short block will be entirely complete. So that's real imperative how I did the timing cover there. And if you're ever, it's always useful to do the water pump sealer first, because you can put the water pump in a freezer with that sealer, and that sealer will not set up near as quickly. So you buy yourself a little bit of time. But anyway, that's pretty much how it's done. So there you have it.